quickly. Settle down.
The time is June 1945. The occasion, the return to his homeland of a war hero whose stature has seldom been matched in the esteem of his countrymen. The European phase of the greatest war that America ever fought is over, and part of the warmth with which the people of Abilene, Kansas greet General Dwight Eisenhower reflects the deep joy of a nation approaching peace again. Some of it is a welcome any hometown might give a favorite son who has done well. But more than that, it is a testimony to the gratitude felt in every corner of the Allied world for a man who stewarded a crusade to its victory. His crusade had many battles and many triumphs, but it found its symbol in one day above all others. D-Day, June 6th, 1944. The invasion of Fortress Europe was one of the greatest military undertakings of all time. On the outcome of this bold effort hung the fate of the war. Because so much hope had been bound up in the success of this adventure, the architect of that success found the hearts of the people open to him, from Europe to the town of his boyhood, where the adventure of Dwight David Eisenhower, the man, began. Abilene, Kansas, following the war, was a busy and proud town of almost 7,000 people living in the heart of the western wheatland, and was typical of the kind of town that comes to mind with the phrase grassroots. Its streets and its buildings bore testimony to a living and growing America. One of its proudest buildings, the Eisenhower Museum, was visited daily by citizens from all parts of the country. The museum's interior depicts the life of Dwight Eisenhower from childhood on in a series of murals. From infancy, his life had the flavor of grassroots America about it. Eisenhower was born in 1890 in Denison, Texas, of parents whose families had migrated to Pennsylvania from Europe and then to the Midwest. Young Eisenhower's parents had lived in Abilene before his birth, and it was there that they returned when he was an infant. And it was here that he grew to maturity through a childhood that was active, eager, and happy, an experience he shared with his family. It was a boyhood in which sports played an important part. The active life was important, but the greatest single staple of the Eisenhower family was religious observance. On the wall of the bedroom shared by Dwight and his brother Edgar hung the simple testament of faith, "Thy will be done." It was a home of patriotism as well as faith, and of respect for things of the mind. He was 20 when he left Abilene for the military academy at West Point, where so many great Americans have begun their march into history. Eisenhower graduated from the academy in 1915 and was commissioned a second lieutenant in the infantry. A new phase of life was beginning for Eisenhower. In the summer of 1916, as a newly promoted first lieutenant stationed at Fort Sam Houston, Texas, he married Mamie Geneva Dowd of Denver. Meanwhile, events in Europe were forging a new phase of life for the entire world. World War I gave many a future general his first experience with combat, but young Eisenhower was not among them. Instead, World War I brought him command of a tank training center in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, where he prepared troops of the new Tank Corps for overseas duty. He received the Distinguished Service Medal for his performance, but before he was able to get to Europe, the war ended. In the late 1920s, after graduation from the Command and General Staff School, Major Dwight Eisenhower went to Europe for the first time. He was stationed in France to prepare a guidebook on American battlefields across the continent. The 30s brought other assignments, culminating with his service under General Douglas MacArthur in the Philippines. For 4 years, he worked with MacArthur, who was Commander-in-Chief of the Philippine Army, to help the Commonwealth government work out a plan for its military defense. Ordered back to the States in December 1939, Lieutenant Colonel Eisenhower went to Fort Lewis, Washington as executive officer of the 15th Infantry Regiment. In the dark spring of 1940, German armored divisions were crashing through Holland and Belgium. The Luftwaffe was streaking its destruction through Europe's skies. France trembled, and Britain stood alone. The United States passed a Selective Service Act to prepare for what inevitably lay ahead. It became Colonel Eisenhower's duty to aid in that preparation. Late in 1940, he was made Chief of Staff of the 3rd Division, where his diligence and hard work brought him assignment as Chief of Staff of the 9th Corps. In the summer of 1941, Colonel Eisenhower became Chief of Staff to General Walter Kruger, whose newly organized Third Army was preparing to participate in the most realistic war maneuvers yet held by American troops. In these maneuvers over the Louisiana countryside, as America fought against time to train its growing army of citizen soldiers, Eisenhower's task was to work out a plan of defense against an invading mechanized force. Soon after the maneuvers were over, Eisenhower was promoted to Brigadier General. Within days, the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor. From almost this moment on, the fate of the nation and the fate of General Dwight Eisenhower would be inextricably bound together. Called to Washington in the first weeks after the war began, Eisenhower went to work in the War Plans Office of the War Department. Among the goals formulated during this time was the strategic determination to eventually cross the English Channel. The mural covering the west wall of the Eisenhower Museum dramatizes the process of General Eisenhower's rapid ascension to public prominence. Because an all-out channel crossing would be impossible before 1944, and because the need for offensive action was immediate in 1942, the Allies undertook, as a combined operation under the command of General Dwight Eisenhower, the invasion of North Africa. The minimum objective of this maneuver was to seize the main ports between Casablanca and Algiers. Along the rim of the North African coast, troops went ashore in late November. Eisenhower's hope was to push quickly east along the Mediterranean and take the important posts of Bizerte and Tunis. But a number of unfavorable circumstances, including treacherous weather conditions, prompted the commander to hold off on his final assault. In the spring, however, troops of Omar Bradley's 2nd Corps were able to take Bizerte, and at the same time, Tunis fell to the British First Army. With these victories came the end of the Axis Empire in Africa. The Allied leaders and the men who had fought under them proudly commemorated their victory. One of the greatest products of this victory, in the words of the commander himself, was the progress achieved in Allied unity and the establishment of a combat team that was already showing the benefits of a growing confidence and trust among all of its members. The successful end of the campaign brought personal recognition to Eisenhower. Throughout the world, he was seen as a great leader. But the commander himself interpreted this recognition as proof that free men can find in unity a way to victory, even against seemingly impossible odds. The next big campaign, the invasion of Sicily, brought further demonstration of this basic truth. Allied troops took this vital rock in the summer of 1943. And now, the Allies prepared for what was to be the most fiercely fought battle of the Mediterranean War, the invasion of Italy itself. Through a miracle of courage and tenacity, troops of General Mark Clark's Fifth Army established a beachhead against overwhelming German odds and went on to take Salerno and the vital port of Naples. Although heavy fighting and important battles lay ahead, with these victories, the first major objectives of the Italian campaign were accomplished. Allied forces were on European soil and would be able to pin down German troops far from the scene of the cross-channel invasion being planned for the following year. Shortly after the Tehran and Cairo conferences, the man who would command this awesome undertaking was named General Dwight Eisenhower, whom people throughout the free world were now calling the man of the hour. On the east wall of the Eisenhower Museum, another mural depicts some of the major episodes in the Great Crusade which liberated Europe. The Supreme Commander's orders from the combined Chiefs of Staff were quite simple: to land on the coast of France and thereafter to destroy the German ground forces. Between the order and its execution lay an agony of effort. Across the Channel, the heavy fortifications lining the coast of France bespoke the Nazis' belief that they could push the invading armies back into the sea. In France alone, 58 German divisions were waiting. Preparing for the invasion was a job without pause. Incessant and realistic training was of paramount importance. The challenges of morale, the myriad details of coordination on every level, all of these were overwhelming. But through those tense months in the early part of 1944, the preparations continued. And finally, after being postponed one day because of weather conditions, the eve of D-Day was at hand. The commander visited the airborne troops who would lead the invasion. "I found the men in fine fettle," he wrote later, joshingly admonishing me that I had no cause for worry. D-Day, with the fate of the war hanging in the balance. 500,000 troops, backed by millions more, faced outward across a stormy sea. On beaches that dotted the French coast of the Channel, Canadian and American troops touched shore. The first fateful moments passed, and Allied troops were holding on French soil. 1 week after the landings, the commander was able to say to the vast armies under him, "Your accomplishments in the last 7 days of this campaign have exceeded my highest hopes." Less than 2 months after the invasion, the Allied force broke out of the beachhead perimeter in the hedgerow country around Saint-Lô. Then began the dramatic pursuit, spearheaded by General George S. Patton's armored force across the heart of France. And then, the grand triumphant march through Paris after its liberation by French troops and soldiers of the U.S. Fifth Corps. Beyond Paris lay the liberation of Belgium and the yard-by-yard struggle across the German border. Blocking the steady pursuit of victory lay the Nazi counteroffensive in the Ardennes forest, known as the Battle of the Bulge. Through a grim and bleak period of several weeks, the enemy, supported by devastating conditions, isolated and assaulted Allied forces. General Eisenhower called upon all troops to rise to new heights of courage and effort. The brave men of the beleaguered forces held and steadily began pressing the enemy back. From that moment onward, the Supreme Commander expected the Nazi resistance to fall continually. With the crossing of the bridge at Remagen in March 1945, the heart of the Nazi defenses was pierced. Still, there remained the substantial task of mopping up what was left of the enemy west of the Rhine and accepting the surrender of the droves of German soldiers that began to appear. Both Commander and GI felt the exhilaration of victory's approach. Finally, victory came with the German surrender on May 7, 1945. As the world heralded his accomplishment, Dwight Eisenhower spoke, making clear to all whom he believed was responsible for the Allied victory.
I have the proud privilege of speaking for a victorious army of almost 5 million fighting men. They and the women who have so ably assisted them constitute the Allied expeditionary forces that have liberated Western Europe. They have captured or destroyed enemy armies totaling more than their own strength. Merely to name my principal subordinates in the Canadian, French, American, and British forces is to present a picture of the utmost in efficiency, skill, loyalty, and devotion to duty. The United Nations will gratefully remember Tedder, Montgomery, Spaatz, Bradley, DeLotte, Creer, and many others. But all these agree with me in the selection of the truly heroic figure of this war. He is G.I. Joe and his counterpart in the air, the Navy, and the merchant marine of every one of the United Nations. He has braved the dangers of U-boat infested seas. He has surmounted charges into desperately defended beaches. He has fought his tedious, patient way through the ultimate in fortified zones. He has endured cold, hunger, fatigue. His companion has been danger. Death has dogged his footsteps. He and his platoon commanders have given us an example of loyalty, devotion to duty, and indomitable courage that will live in our hearts as long as we admire those qualities in men.
With the end of the European crusade began the long and happy road home. For Dwight Eisenhower, that road was paved with the cheers of the people of the Allied countries. In his own homeland, a hero's welcome awaited him, America's greeting for a favorite son. The story of Dwight Eisenhower might well have ended on this note of triumph and acclaim for a job so splendidly done. But America had other tasks waiting for its favorite soldier. Eisenhower succeeded General Marshall as the Army's first post-war chief of staff. He believed that one of the great pillars of world peace is a strong United States. He visited troops stationed in various parts of the world to show America's growing sense of global responsibility. We must remain, he said, the first champions of those who seek to lead their own lives in peace with their neighbors. Finally, on February 7th, 1948, the general from Abilene, after 36 years of service to his country, left active military assignment. But not active participation in the life of his nation. He accepted an invitation from Columbia University to serve as president of that great institution, enabling him, or so he thought at the time, to devote the remainder of his useful life to the challenges of education. Events of the post-war world dictated otherwise. The urgent necessity for unity in the free world brought into being the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO. And it was evident that only one man could make that vital and complicated organization work from the outset: Dwight Eisenhower. At the end of 1950, He answered his country's call once more and was on European soil to assume command of the armies of the Alliance. Against new threats rising from the Soviets, who had once been his nation's ally, he had to create in the war-weary European soul the will to defend itself. For more than a year, he labored diligently at his task of coalition. When he turned over the reins of command to General Matthew Ridgway, the structure of military unity among free nations on which rested the hope for continued peace was established. Once again, with the accomplishment of substantial victory behind him, this might well have been the end of his public career. And in a sense it was, the closing chapter in the story of Eisenhower the soldier. History has recorded the story of Eisenhower the statesman, who led his nation into a period of prosperity and goodwill unparalleled in history, who brought his country to greatness in both war and peace. The lives of the warrior and the statesman may seem separate, but they are one and the same, belonging to this one man. A remarkable man, a remarkable life. Dwight David Eisenhower, a hero.